All right, I'm here with Andrew, and we're gonna do a little roundup of some frequently asked questions and a little bit of wish list. We've gotten our feet wet a little bit with Dropfleet 2.0 now and played a few games. Among other things, there was a tournament that kind of shook things up and forced some responses to rule questions, at least. And we're just gonna go over it. Let me just go to the next slide here. Okay, so abilities and ability points.
Mm-hmm.
So with the mulligan, which player rolls crippling effects, explosions, and saves for a drop site? It's a very good question.
Uh, yeah, like this had come up. Couple things like it's not very explicit, I guess, in the rules to say like, is it the opponent that's like, is the defending player the one who rolls the saves for drop sites? Although there is a resistance ability that explicitly says that the what is it? The opponent rolls crippling effects.
Yeah, because you make them roll two and you pick one, right?
It's 2d6.
Excuse me. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's 2d6, and then like the other question is as well on crippling effect rolls. Like, is it roll one of them? Do you roll the set of two? Um, I
Yeah.
mean, those are all things that it's a legitimate question.
So
I would assume. Go ahead.
I usually lean two ways about it. What I usually talk it out beforehand, which is either
Hmm.
if it would damage the other person's ship, then you should roll it because you're like basically always attacking them. So it makes sense to me that like if you did the damage that caused crippling, then you should roll the crippling against that ship, right? Or it's like crippling is like a command thing, almost like a backup save. So you're rolling for your own ship, trying to not be crippled poorly. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
And I feel like it can go either way thematically. I just want it to be one way or the other.
Hmm. I think that's fair. I think as a TO, like if they don't make any clarifications on it, I probably will. Um, and then for like structural damage and the reactor rupture, I've had a couple people ask questions about like is if they use that like I'm referencing the abilities that like fix the crippling effect, right? You
Yeah,
choose it says instead of. So I don't think that there's a roll that actually happens. That's how I would interpret that one. So you can't try to say that the result was a 4 on structural damage and then try to like manipulate that roll. Like I think that's a little I don't know what's the term. Like is it beardy? Is it just it's kind of gamey if
yeah,
that's an
yeah.
interpretation you take?
No, I agree.
But
Sorry.
there is the question about like what happens with asset removal on scenery, right? Because like that is not it's like it's not a save. It's just roll for your I think I would interpret that it's the player that owns the assets rolls it.
Yeah,
I think
I
that's where I
agree.
would want to go.
And in, let's say, the case that there's only one case, and that's accepting another rule get ruled a certain way. If you both have assets on a site, I would say that the controlling player should roll. Like if you had two battalions and I had one battalion, I would think the
Hmm.
controlling player should roll the saves for the site. But it still would affect both of you, so it gets kind of weird.
Oh,
Would
I get what you said. Like if you're like bombarding the site or something like that, is
Yeah.
that what you're referencing
Now,
to?
if you have equal battalions, then I don't know. It doesn't.
Well, I mean, like one player is obviously the attacking player, right? So if one player is the attacking player, the other usually this is a two-player game, so some other player is the defender.
Yes. Yeah.
If you're playing a multiplayer game, uh, it's something
Yeah.
to discuss amongst the people there to say like, well, who's my defender? Who rolls for those things?
Yeah.
That's something that you should discuss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go on. Okay. Weapons free. So interpretations. Each ship may attack with any number of its weapons.
So
Yes.
This has been like a pretty discussed about topic within at least the Discord for sure. Um, I will say that as I play tested in that weapons free was like you picked any number and that number was never fixed by however many were on the ship. We did not count. Like there wasn't a maximum because there was like rules like high power and overcharge, and then also like how weapons hacked interacted with it. Um,
Because it says
so
any number, not all.
right, and it is. I mean, I get that it's not super clear, but like I'm just saying, like as a playtester, it was you could say, I'm gonna fire 10 weapons, but really you only had like three, right, to fire. That's how I kind of like interpreted this value. Like there wasn't you could pick any number, it was never a maximum to it.
Yeah, yeah.
There is some interaction with detector. That's some people arguing like the one less. And so like because I could pick any number, I could pick a number that was obviously much higher than whatever the amount of weapons were on my ship. I think my viewpoint is that if a ship weapons free, they essentially can weapons free fire every weapon that they have and still detect.
Yeah, you're paying for it. You're paying a heavy tax of the spikes anyway. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
c-
Yep.
well, at least logically, right? In theory, the detector system would still work and all the guns fire at the same time.
True. I mean, sure, fluff wise, story wise, that definitely is the case. Rules as written, I think is that's the case as well. I do know that in my discussions about how to check the power level, especially in regards to weapons hack, um, like that was something that was talked amongst the other playtester and I when we made the suggestion of what kind of where weapons hack is too. Like, well, what happens if a ship gets weapons hacked? That encourages the opponent to then say, "Oh, I'm going to weapons free," forcing the spikes onto the group. Then,
Oh, that's a funny way of doing it.
hmm
Um, so and then how does detector interact with volley?
it was a question that had come up, but I don't know of any ship that has detector and volley.
There's not a granting of volley by a command ability, is there? An admiral ability, rather.
If I were to do a quick look over, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be probably what PHR, but I don't think that there is. Well, PHR doesn't have any detectors. I'm trying to think. Could a dish can only go on a frigate?
Yeah, so that doesn't make sense.
Is it the Myrmidon?
Merm,
Like I don't know.
Myrmidon, whatever.
Myrmidon? Is that what it's called? Yeah, so like that one does okay, so it does have detector and volley. Um,
The detector just replaces a weapon, right?
in essence, yes. Like you fire one less by what the order decrees, right? So
Right.
let's see. So if I go on general quarters, or not I, but if the Myrmidon uses general quarters, it should be able to fire three weapons. It should be
Right.
able to fire the heavy vent cannons, and then any like either the close action or an artillery cannon battery, and then the third weapon is basically an artillery cannon battery.
Right.
If you fire one less, if you choose to fire, I think the NC-16 missile battery, then I would assume you don't get the volley. But I'm going to cross-reference that one with the rule because I think that volley counts the weapons as a single system.
Yeah, I think so too. Okay. Well, I'll let you answer that before I ask about high power and overcharge.
Yeah, so it says this weapon counts as so volley says this weapon counts as one weapon for order purposes. When you assign this weapon to target, you assign it to targets up to X times.
So that's not how detector replaces one weapon system, right? So
It just says you fire one less.
yeah, but volley is one. A thing with volley is right.
It counts as one, but the thing is like I'm trying to figure out a situation that like if you are you really hard pressed in like you could fire one, you could not fire the low power weapon, I would believe.
Yeah,
And then
it's
like
strange.
yes.
Strange scenario. I don't know. I feel like someone's trying to ask a way to use volley to detect multiple times.
I can see that. Or be able to get away with like because they if it's volley 2 on it, like fire the weapon once, right? And then still be able to fire again.
Yeah, like volley shooting the gun and then use volley as if shooting the gun the second time, but then detect.
Right.
Yeah,
So
it's strange. I think it could just use a clarification. It's not really clear what the intent is. But I feel like this is not the intent.
no. Well, I'm just trying to think of a situation in which like you would, is what in what instance? Yes, this is like you're playing the theory game, but is there really a situation that you would try to use try to do that, right? Because like the artillery cannon battery has 10 dice. Oh, it hits on fours. I suppose like if you're like me, I suppose like a lock 3 versus a lock 4 can make a difference. So
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, so how does weapons free interact with high power and overcharge?
so this was brought up again like if someone's fixated on uh the maximum number of weapons being what's on the profile, right?
Yeah.
Then theoretically they could never fire a high power weapon, right? Because there's a bunch of Biofisser ships that have overcharge, but they maybe have only like one weapon system. I think.
Yeah.
I'm trying to let me see if I can pull one up. Um, yeah, for perfect example is a Cipher. So it only has one weapon and it can overcharge. So clearly you can pick a number beyond the number of weapons that are on the ship. Otherwise, you can never overcharge the Thermator.
That's very silly, but I understand.
And I think that's how high power is meant to interact. I think that's how we are to interpret that statement. Each ship may attack with any number of its weapons.
Yeah. Okay. Well, how about battalion combat? I kind of mentioned this. What happens when
Mhm.
multiple players have battalions on a drop site and it features on that drop site? Which player declares intentions first? Like intention to move?
Or not move, but like combat. Who are you going to do combat with? Because right now, the order is if you have battalions at the drop site, they fight or they combat they can combat battalions at a feature first.
Okay.
So if you and I are going against each other and we both have guy battalions on a drop site, and you have battalions on feature 1 and I have battalions on feature 2, who gets to like how that decision process, how is it done?
Right, because you would assume something like, okay, for all our battalions on the drop site general, they get to allocate dice at the feature or at the other ones on the drop site general space.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The ones on the feature can only attack the same feature, right?
Correct.
So if you had two on opposite features, nothing would happen because no one's in the middle of the drop site.
Correct.
Okay.
And usually, like, and there's a lot of like a lot of theoretical situations that occur. I think once people start realizing and playing the game, like you really only drop battalions on a feature if you have an intent to destroy that feature.
Well, or use it, right? Like if it
No,
has.
you can be at a drop site and still use the features at the drop site. You don't have to actually put battalions on a scenery
Oh,
feature.
I see. So it's if you're gonna destroy it. I understand.
That's the only reason.
Because if you
I
hold the
do
drop site, you hold all of its features, so to speak.
pretty much.
So you get to shoot its guns and what have you.
Hmm.
Use its armor saves.
Hmm. And that was the whole streamlining of, right, like a cluster and getting rid of clusters, getting rid of sectors. Like we just have a drop site. Whoever's
Honestly,
got the most.
I do like the way it is now. It's much faster, and I especially like alternating dropping stuff. It makes it much more interesting
Hmm.
through the
Hmm.
turn to try to fight over control of the drop site.
Yeah.
That being said, you can't target features directly with bombardment, I don't think.
Correct.
So it becomes weird because it's like if we have opposite features we're holding and no one in the drop site general, I can't target the place I know you are and only you are.
Well, I mean, you don't target, like, you have to be able to do, if you just do enough damage, you just remove the feature you don't like.
Well, sure, but it's also that I'm bombarding.
Hmm.
Let's say it's so inaccurate, I can't decide between the east side and the west side of Chicago. We're shooting at the whole of Chicago because our accuracy is just so wild. But the problem is that you're on the east side, I'm on the west side. We don't split the hits where you take saves and I take saves because like a friendly fire being a thing, I'm not mad at that idea. That's fine. It like danger close or something.
Yeah.
But that's not what happens. Uh, I they kind of leaned into. We'll probably talk about it more later.
Mm.
Into not being able to shoot at it at all if you have any friendly stuff there.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's an easy way to clean that up. To just we both take saves or something like that.
Well, I mean, right now it's if you and I both have battalions there and I shoot it, we each take off. So, like, say I do 2 damage, we each take 2 battalions off. I believe that's how
Yeah.
that gets played.
Yeah, so each damage is actually doing like double damage, so to speak.
Right. And I'm okay with that. Like you gotta
No, I
you
like that.
gotta have.
I just want a way for it to not be forbidden. That's all.
Yeah. No, I agree with that.
Anyway.
One thing I do wish that they would do is reorder it. I think drop site removal should happen before feature fights. So, like, if I have guys at a drop site and you have guys at a drop site, you have to resolve that drop site combat first before I say, "Oh, I'm going to have these guys fight someone in a feature."
Oh, I see. So like the guys in the drop site fight each other, and you're saying whoever is left after that, then they out. Yeah, because it's 1-to-1, right? So it
Correct.
doesn't. There's no rolling of dice. So if
Hmm.
you have 3 and I have 2 on the drop site, you get 1 left over, and then you can allocate that 1 against one of the features.
Correct.
I think that makes sense. That's pretty clean.
Yeah. Like, I like it because I think it's cleaner, but I have yet to really test it out. I don't have in my games that I've played. drop site, there hasn't been too many wacky
That
drop site battalion combat.
that turns the features into like hideouts for the little battalion that's in that one section, you know.
Yeah, but I mean, you can always fight it. So like,
Yeah,
unless
there's the one battalion, you know, hiding in the airport or whatever. It kind of makes sense thematically. I mean, that's in the image of real life too, the way that conflicts go.
yeah.
Okay, let's go on. Okay, boarding actions. Are they powerful? Should more ships have Marine X? I'm just going to go out and say there don't seem to be a lot of ways to conduct boarding actions at present. There's a couple, and that's kind of it.
Yeah. Well, yes. And there's not a lot of interaction, right? Like there's not everything has a backup save. There was a misunderstanding. Some people interpreted formation benefits, like if you're in a group, that backup save could save you from the battalions. I know that was not the intent of that.
Yeah.
I'm definitely of the camp of like we don't need, not every ship needs Marine X, and if not every carrier needs it as well. Like quantity doesn't necessarily mean quality in my mind.
Yeah, I think I was kind of expecting one of the factions to have much more Marine X than others, whether it was Scourge or Bioficers specifically. So I found it odd that wasn't really the case. Also, as the Resistance player, I have like specific command abilities sort of for the scenario, and it never comes up. So it's kind of like well, when am I ever going to use this? And even if I am to use it, it's extremely inefficient because they're using like a couple. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'll just tank the damage. I got a hull. It's fine.
I've been tinkering with a boarding list. I mean, it can be a lot. I've like, you can run three groups of Herokus of three, so it's like 9 Herokus, and it can be pretty brutal if you're not mindful or you don't shoot them.
I just feel like it's like a close action version of core weapons is what it feels like to me.
That's fair. Yeah.
But it's like a tech. It's not the backbone of any faction.
No,
I don't know.
I don't. Like I said, like you just have like Herokus are probably the biggest abuser right now, I think, of boarding actions. Maybe the Corruptor torpedoes from Bioficers, but like torpedoes you see coming, and Herokus, like you can plan for them, right? Like
Yeah.
you should be able to shoot them down. Once they have a 6+ save, and then there's a 6+ on formation benefits.
Yeah.
They you blow at them and essentially they're dead.
Yes. In the mirror match, it sounds very hilarious, actually.
That would be funny. Yeah, they just capture each other.
Yeah. Very bad space capture the flag.
The what's the one that what am I thinking? The Pungari Thresher. Like, I mean, I guess if it becomes too much, like the Pungari Thresher's got 6 boarding pods, man. That thing will, like, if you ignore it, it will basically take down a cruiser
Yeah,
in a turn. Like,
they're gonna start like a new Sid Meier Civilization game on board your ship. That's
but their threat range is 9. Like, I don't.
don't get
You
that
should be
close.
right. Don't get close to the Thresher. Like, shoot it.
Yeah. All right. Well, we can go on, I guess. Asset combat. Okay.
Oh,
Do assets attack sequentially or simultaneously? Do you mean bombers?
yeah. Generally, this is bombers. They can go with fighters too as well.
So do you mean if I have, let's say, two different groups? They're not really groups.
Wings,
Two
right?
different wings. Let's say touching the same dreadnought, and there's two, and then there's a three.
Mm-hmm.
Is this the question of, do I roll 5 together, or do I roll 2 and then I roll 3?
Yeah. Or let's say it's not a dreadnought. Let's say it's something even smaller, right? What if my first attack is enough to destroy the target? Does the other wing of 2 like disappear, or are they still on the board and can attack something later?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know.
Um, if I were to clarify it, my intent, right, would be when you do asset attacks, you treat that asset attack. So like all your bombers are like one ship, right? Ship, I put it in quotations. And each bombing wing is a weapon. Well,
Yeah.
just like when you fire a ship, you have to declare all your attacks and you have to roll all of those too. So when you roll, so like when you have the wing of 2 and the wing of 3 in base contact with their target, you will roll uh both of those attacks. You can't like what was it? Um Maximize the damage. You can't wait to see if the damages and kills it and then roll for the other one, right?
Yeah.
You do have to keep the dice separate, but they all roll simultaneously. That's how I would interpret that one.
And then also you have, do bombers need balancing? So my experience has been that they're not very powerful. I really like the big wing benefit that they have going on, but it seems like a really difficult threshold to reach, or you have to be heavily invested and you kind of only get it for like the first couple turns before, assumedly, your opponent starts to try to pick apart the pieces that provides like a big wing. There's also questions about how wings combine into each other and when the sequencing of that happens. Like if you have two separate groups, launch 5 ships and then or launch 5 bombers and then launch 5 bombers, and I just like put one stack of 5 and then put the other stack like on top of it, and now it becomes 10, or you know what I'm saying? Or can one
I think so.
move on to the other and now you know what I'm saying? And it just doesn't move, and now it's a wing of 10 at the end of the movement of assets. It's not extremely clear. I feel like there's an easy assumption to make, but it's not explained.
I agree. It is definitely not the clearest of things.
Because they're still treated as point space, so it becomes weird.
I know during playtest, after some clarification, it was basically things wing after everything has moved. So after all your fighters have moved, check for wings, right? Declare whether or not they're going to wing up.
Same for
there
bombers.
Same for bombers. There was a lot of worry about like leapfrogging assets was a concern during playtest. I didn't think that it was too concerning. I never really got like during playtest. Launch was kind of took a backseat trying to figure out some other like rules, conundrums, and interactions. But we never, in my playtest experience, didn't think that bombers were too powerful. Although I definitely got the feeling that like TT was worried about them being too powerful.
I just feel like they need, like, I don't want to launch more tokens. I just feel like they need like a little more dice, maybe a lower threshold for the benefit. Not a lot lower, just like a little lower.
A lot of players are saying, well, I say a lot, right? My small sample size, but I hear players saying like, there's a camp of like launch is fine. There's a camp of launch like needs to get a point reduction, right? So these carriers are too expensive, and it's not worth playing with them.
Yeah.
I don't know. I did play test. I did play test the other week at 1250 trying to drop 24 bombers um in a turn. Although the scenario actually I think checks launch very well because like if you're a distant deployment, your carriers might not come out soon enough.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
The scenery is brutal in this addition to assets, right? So if there's any planetary ring on the board, like that's basically a scenario that says assets are not going to be able to get across the board.
You're stuck on this
Um,
side, or you have to wait and then deploy on that side.
right, right. So that become like there's a lot of things I think TT was just really worried about it being overpowering because
Yeah,
that
yeah.
Wing 7 rule,
And I
but I
respect
don't.
that. I totally do.
Yeah.
But I think they were very cautious, and I think we could tune them up just a little, not too
Mhm.
much, just a little bit.
There's some argument too to make them thrust a little faster. I think they probably average around maybe 7 or 6 inches.
I like the thrust distances mostly because everyone has a generic ability to move them faster that they spend admiral points for, and they kind of behave as part of the fleet more this way. I like it the way it is.
If let me ask you this question, um, what if that ability to let them move again? I like to call it time to target because it's thematic back to the V1. If time to target was able to be used multiple times on a wing, how would you feel about that
I
in
would
a
love
turn?
that. I would love that because you would have to overcommit your resources, but you would get like a one-shot mission.
But you would be okay, like essentially then, right? If I'm running an Admiral level 3, I can commit essentially 2 points, so that's six.
I think I
So
think
12 inches,
I think in a
18.
fleet or yeah, a launch fleet versus launch fleet, even just like a mix,
Hmm.
it makes it more interesting because now you have this cat and mouse of the admiral points being used. And like if I have this little wing of fighters, I'm going to keep moving them around because I'm worried about where you're going to try to throw bombers through the line. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying?
Hmm.
And I want to be able to try to counter you because of the sequencing, you know?
Yeah.
So
Like
I think it would be really good, interesting strategic gameplay. That's without adding that much complexity.
yeah. Like I mean that's essentially kind of like what we were doing when we were playtesting, and then they kind of capped it because they were worried about it moving so fast. And I mean, my opponent was very surprised by like, hey, I just got a wing of 12 bombers to go 18 inches. That felt very unexpected, but I didn't know if that was because we were finally delving
Honestly, that
into it.
one, if he rolled it that one way, you might not have to change bombers at all because that might be enough benefit and utility added to them to make it worth it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Anyway, we should go on to the next one here. Payload-X. What happens when the payload ships have spikes and another payload ship detaches? Does it have the spikes of the group?
Yeah, this one came up in what I saw, and it's a really good question.
It makes sense, like logically to me. However, I think it should not have the shit spikes of the group.
So I think, in my opinion, is it all hinges on in the rule payload, it says that in subsequent activations that the payload ships act as a group. So really, I what I think happens is that it's only when they activate they are a group. In all other instances,
They're not a group.
they're
They're
not a
they're a
group,
payload. They're like a battalion that floats in space.
or they're just individual ships. So if you spike, like you have, like unfortunately, you have to keep track of what activated, and then where those spikes are actually applying. Because like if a detector targets a payload ship, it's only that payload ship that gets the spikes.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's kind of like you can spike the Amazon van, or you can spike the boxes in the Amazon van. I'm okay with that. It is a little bit of bookkeeping, but I would rather keep them separate, because otherwise you start adding crunchy rules about like the transitive property of spikes between the payload and the other ship, or vice versa. And I think that's too crunchy. Or for gameplay. For thematic, I totally get it, but for gameplay, I don't think so.
Yeah. So, but I think I might be in the minority with that interpretation. You know, I don't know if people really agree with that one. But that's how I see it. That's how I would interpret it.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see what I'd be curious as to what TT makes as a final. Well, as their next ruling for it.
Okay, Bombardment. Well, I've already mentioned this 100 times. I really care because I'm the Resistance player. But can you target contested drop sites? They sort of say no, has been their response. Not rules as written, but their response.
You can. I mean, like it's. They say that you cannot target a drop site you control. Well, if it's contested, you don't control it.
That's
so
true.
You can't target contest. Now, there are players out there who don't think that that's thematic, or they don't agree with that one.
It depends on the faction, in my opinion. But we're also talking about scales that are a little absurd. So I don't mean absurd like it's not like the universe doesn't make sense. It's just that, like, okay, so you have global warfare, then you have like nuclear Armageddon warfare, then you have space versus planet warfare, and that's where we're at. So in this gameplay, I'm like, it might not be that you're actually bombing the guys in the city. It's just that there's too many power plants, there's too much collateral for you to account for all of that, because you're in a giant spaceship way up in orbit with giant guns.
Yeah.
You're just trying to hit the bad guys a little more than the good guys. That's considered success.
Yeah. And I think, like, as a game mechanic wise, like, if they remove this condition, we're back to V1, and then my concern is what use is bombardment then? Like,
yeah, it becomes I like it because you can make interesting plays, and it makes the fighting over sectors, or I should say drop sites, more fun and interesting. Especially if your opponent has bombardment and drop, and then like you guys can play this whole game all over the sector, but it's way simple and it's way faster than V1. And I think keeping that in is just a solid improvement. Choosing target in orbit, you mean like ships in orbit?
Yeah. So now,
not atmosphere. You're saying in orbit. So
in orbit, there has been discussion too about targeting ships in atmosphere, but basically a bombardment gun right now is basically can target ships in atmosphere, can target ships in orbit. Again, there was, I think,
the
at the weapons free
is the base accuracy, not the improved bombardment to a drop site accuracy, or lock, I should say.
Right, you're not getting the +2 because it's not a drop site, or it's not a city.
I think it's perfectly acceptable. They are not like broadside, high volume of dice weapons. So I don't see really the issue. You're just hoping in certain desperate situations to plink off some damage, because the reality is I don't think you're ever really you're not really choosing your bombardment weapon shooting at the worst lock unless there's no other targets. And I think that makes thematic sense. It just gives you something.
There was talk there were some people making some claims about Dave saying like he didn't think that was what should be happening.
I think it's okay because the planet's not flat, actually, even though we're playing on a flat board. And the ships, there are many funny jokes about this, but the ships don't come in to scene all facing each other point to
Yeah.
point. It's three-dimensional space. They're pointing all kinds of directions.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
saying that the bombardment weapon can't see it, I mean, you can orbit and be pointing outward from the planet. It's very possible. And in
Well, I
that
mean,
case, your bombardment turret is pointing all around, like along the orbit. You know what I'm
yep,
saying? To where you would shoot at
yep.
other ships. It makes perfect. You're not as accurate. That gun's not made for that. That totally makes sense.
And I can see like there might be, maybe there'll be like escape velocity or something like that where, if you're not targeting a drop site, then maybe you might see a reduction in lock. But I think
Yeah,
completely saying that like you can't use the weapon for anything but targeting drop sites really hinders
yeah.
a lot of usage of the
I
ships.
think we just keep the built-in negative, which right now is kind of like the reverse, where it's positive when you use it for its intended purpose. But
Yeah.
I think we keep it in. I I don't see anyone breaking it. If we see something gross where it is getting broken, then I would consider taking it out. But I'm not really seeing the evidence in any of the games I've seen.
I will be I'm guilty. Like Charybdis, like I'm a Scourge player. When Charybdis was 4+, like that ship was like a solid go-to.
Yeah,
Um I dealt, it's at a 6
we're
right
still
now for
recording.
lock. I'm at a 6 for lock and it's like
Yeah,
it's not as good, but I don't know
yeah,
what I don't know what the there's a lot of options they can do here. I just hope they don't hit it so hard that you can't go to contested and you just can't shoot anything else.
yeah.
Like
That would
that's like V1 again.
yeah. I would really dislike that. Okay,
Yeah.
moving on. Crippling. In regards to crippling fire, is it per critical hit that damages? So you're saying, I think the answer is no, because you can only cause
Damn.
fire once, right?
Yeah, you can cause fire. Crippling fire is the only one that you can have multiples of.
Oh, I thought it was per weapon. So
It
if you had three
is,
ships with fire, you could do it one, two, three if they all hit.
yeah. So like that's the weird thing, right? So like there is there needs to be some clarification about, especially in regards to Scourge bombers, how many crippling fires get applied.
Yeah,
Is it the number of, some people have interpreted that it's the number of die. Um, I I have had some confusing things told to me. I think rules as written, it's just like what you said. It's the number of tokens per the weapon.
yes.
So a wing counts as a single weapon. The best that that wing can do is cause a single crippling effect.
I think that would be good and also prevent some shenanigans,
Mm-hmm. Because
namely
you don't, a
namely fire
bomber wing
ships.
causing 10 crippling fires like is
Absurd.
that's not fun. Yeah, like that shouldn't happen.
Yeah, I
But I think that that's some people are interpreting it like that. But then there's the FAQ is also not helping. I don't think the question might need clarification. Because it definitely sounds like it's per crippling or per critical hit. That
yeah,
and damages.
I think per weapon, because per weapon is more in line with things they've done in the past, including in this edition.
Hmm.
Okay, let's go on. Scald X. The Scald affect all weapons fired by the group as it refers to that attack, which is, which is defined under 7.3 as the whole attack sequence and doesn't have the saves made for other weapons are unaffected clause burn through has.
No, probably because like the claws burn through has. I think it's just some gamey players maybe interpreting an attack as what they're saying is that the scald modifier applies to all the dice in this attack sequence from every weapon.
No, I don't think that's right.
I mean, I agree with you.
It's only those weapons.
Yeah, and I think that's like I think what they're misconstruing is this attack sequence, and they're basically saying that this attack sequence is the attack, and therefore all the scald weapons must modify every one of those successful
If that was
attacks.
the case, it would be sort of like the weapons are not firing in one sequence. If you said Scald was affecting the next group that fired at the same target, maybe, but then they would explicitly call it out that, like, you created a Scald effect with one attack, and then now a new group is attacking a ship that has been scalded. That's not how the rule works.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree with you. I mean, even as a Scourge player myself, like I was like, it definitely did not feel
Yeah.
correct.
It's per weapon that has Scald, period. You'll have to roll them separate. That's just how it is.
Yep.
All right, status. Does the token apply the hit before saves or after saves?
I didn't catch this because I hadn't been testing that ship. It's the Iridium. So there's a conundrum that happens with the Iridium is that the way the status is written is that it says it's when it's a hit, you apply whatever status. But it sounds like it's done before rolls to save. So if you pick what is it, defenses offline,
Yeah.
then they and it's a status weapon with an actual damage value. So you're always going to want to pick defenses offline then
Yeah. It's
to
odd.
damage the ship. It is, and I think that's how it just gets ruled. But I think some people might, they may argue that it is a save afterwards, but I wouldn't be surprised if TT, it's like a coin flip as to what they may say.
Yeah, well, we will
Is their
see.
intent. Yep.
Okay, Charybdis, Torrent, and launch cost.
We hit on some of these already. So,
Oh, this is the
Cribbit is
bombardment.
going to 6. Yeah, yeah. This is the bombardment frigate. Scourge don't have much for bombardment. Um, I'm curious to see if there's going to be some sort of balance point for the Cribbit because at 6, it won't see, in my opinion, very much play.
Yeah, it's just
or usage.
such an accuracy penalty.
Yeah.
Okay,
I could see it
Torrent.
go to 5. You go to 5, at least you can hit, you can hit cities on 3.
Yeah, even less dice if you're really, really concerned. Or you could make it way more dice on 6s.
Well, I mean that's leaning into what the torrents issue right now is. So there's a lot of players who are expounding the benefits of the torrent. Its weapon on a weapons free is like it has the same attack dice as the cruiser of the same weapon. So it's like 10 dice hitting on 4s with burn through 1.
Weird.
It's or I mean, I mean, if you play the statistics game, you should get a 6 somewhere in that roll, right? You roll
Yeah,
10.
yeah.
You
Of
should
course.
get a 6 somewhere in there. Sadly, I played, I played like 3 games already trying to see if these torrents are rather crazy. I've seen dice rolls with no 6s, and that it's a frowny face. But I've also seen them do a lot of damage, especially to light groups, but not to like a big battleship.
Which
So
I think that's a dichotomy that's good for the game, really.
Mhm. Do they have the potential to like do a lot of damage? Sure.
Hmm.
Um, but I mean, hitting on 4s, their lock is 4. I mean, to me, it feels a little bit like V1 burn through
I,
on Scourge ships.
yeah, I feel like it's one of those things where it'll come out in the averages, but it's a little too early for me to say that it's just bad or just amazing. And I think it's okay to have weapons that are swingy that you have to try to account for. I mean, it's part of what makes tabletop games what they are. I think it's a very regular thing that people want to make way more consistent than is reasonable for what it is. You're going to have to live with it. I think you guys got to test it a bunch more before we say it's definitely bad or it's definitely too powerful.
Yeah. It is definitely something being watched, I think. I think it just needs to be watched, and it is something. And then same thing with, like, again, the Charybdis, and, like, you know, we need to be watching, you know, how is Bombardment being used? Is it being used at all? I was just going over, like, for Adepticon, what are the scenarios, and, you know, some clarifications in regards to that, and making sure that, you know, do we want a scenario with Bombardment or not, or whatever the raise scoring is.
Also, launch cost. What's this about?
Same thing as before, talking about launch. You know, some people are saying that launch costing is too high. Like, it should come down just a couple, like maybe by 5-10 points. Not opposed to it. I'm definitely not opposed to it.
I just don't want them to change launch in too many ways at the same time.
I think that's fair.
I don't want us to tune things down 3 ways and then tune them up 3 ways. I want to see small adjustments, even if they're not enough. I would appreciate more than big jumps.
Yeah. I really hope that they take the approach that they did during in V1, where, you know, they want to do small incremental changes to see what happened, right?
Yeah.
Just like what you said, you pull too many levers, you can't really figure out what's the real issue.
Right, exactly. Okay, so let's see what else we got. Oh, last bits to take away. I put a little existential crisis on the screen for everyone, but
I'm fine with my purpose.
Well, but I believe in my purpose, but I don't know that it's objective proof of our collective one. Anyway, we were waiting to make this video after the big tournament. What was it called?
Weapons Free.
Yeah, because there was a lot of response. It was a good place for the community to kind of like play a lot of games, cause a lot of interactions with different rules and stuff, and see how things shake out. But I don't really have much to add. Do you have anything else to add?
Remember that everything that we've said here is pretty much an opinion, right? Like, we have ideas, conundrums, you know, and that this is one way of interpreting it.
Yeah, there are many interactions in the game in many different ways, and we're navigating it from the other side as much as we can, and just trying to kind of talk to everyone and get things on the same page as much as possible. At the end of the day, it's up to TT Combat to do whatever they're going to do, but we also have to interpret things and keep everything as playable as possible, at least as some interpretation. Boy, I'm glad I'm not a TO.
I'm waiting for that FAQ to come out again. One more, and then I'm gonna write up whatever it is we need for Adepticon. So
yeah, our react to FAQ.
Yeah. I think, like, again, like, I've been more or less pretty happy where things are. Like, is it the greatest? No, but it's better than where it was when I saw it at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's actually very solid right now. We'll see how things go as they release new stuff. But I really enjoy it. I think for some of the old hats that don't want to play the new edition, just try it a couple times. You can use your old bases, just play them as is. I mean, use the rules, but play them as is, as if they are that size, and just try it. Some things might seem wonky, but they're very functional, and they actually make sense. It's also
think
just
so.
a better pace of interaction, I think. It was all training activations before, but now the decision tree is broken up more. There's more paralysis you can get stuck into, but also you're making a lot smaller decisions each time, so it doesn't feel as overwhelming. Anyway,
Totally.
that's all I got.
Same here.
Thanks for listening.